Hello, YouTube and Facebook, or wherever you might be happening to see this. This is Chris Hludzik here, and this is another edition of Chris Hludzik Explains. I haven't done one of these in almost 2 years, and reason being is that the one that I did in the beginning of 2020 was probably a little more optimistic than 2020 ended up being. So I figured, maybe I won't do one for 2021. And so I didn't until now, and it's the end of 2021, so I felt maybe I should do something. But a lot has happened in the last almost 2 years since the last Chris Hludzik Explains video. One of the things I said I wanted to do in the last Chris Hludzik Explains video in 2020 was that I wanted to release some new music. And I ended up doing just that. And I actually ended up doing a lot more than I thought I would. I originally was just going to release some singles, some solo singles. And I ended up doing that. And I ended up doing another album with my side project with Brian Brophy called The Latter Day. Our first album in 14 years at the time. And it was called Matters of Time. And it's a great album. And it's out there on thelatterday.bandcamp.com. And we're really proud of it. It came out great. And it basically came out of, hey, you know, we haven't done anything as The Latter Day in a while. And also, we were sitting at home with nothing to do because of the pandemic. Couldn't really go anywhere, couldn't really do anything. And so we just decided, hey, let's do an album. And we did. And we had some material that was, being held back from our own projects for various reasons. Either it didn't fit or it wasn't finished. And we came together, we had these songs, and they actually ended up working well with this project. And we had songs that we needed to be finished, and we finished them. So, and we made an album, and it came out really, really well. In 2021, I put out a few releases. There was a Latter Day release that came out earlier in 2021, and it's called From the Basement, which is where I am right now, in the basement of my house. And last year in 2020, Brian and I did some live streams on Facebook right here from the basement as the Latter Day. And so I took some of those recordings from the live stream and kind of tried to polish them up the best I could, and released it as kind of a, live in the studio best of kind of. And that's available also on the Latter Day's Bandcamp. I also released in the middle of this year, 2021, I released another demos and rarities compilation called Shadows to Songs. And I was actually really surprised that I had enough material for another compilation like that. Of course, the first one that I did was called Rarities and Casualties, a demos and outtakes compilation that I put out in 2017. So this is kind of like volume 2, Shadows to Songs. And, again, really cool. If you enjoy demos and if you enjoy seeing where songs came from, it's a pretty nice look into that world. I've always been fascinated with that, and that's why I did one. Well, 2 now that I have this one out. As far as the solo stuff that I did last year, I did 3 singles. One was called Hear Me Out. Another was called Just As Well. And, geez, the name of the second slipped me there. I'll think of it. Oh, An Open Letter. Of course, one of the things that we couldn't do last year was play shows. That's probably why I'm having a hard time recalling the names of some of my releases, because I haven't played anything from them live, because there haven't been really any shows to play. Certainly weren't any shows to play last year. Brian and I actually did have a few shows booked, and they were scheduled for pretty much right at the beginning of when the pandemic happened, so they got canceled indefinitely. And honestly, I didn't even really try for anything in 2021 because, you know, there's just less and less places to play, and any of the places that are left are places that I've played before. So one of the promises I made in my early 2020 Chris Hludzik Explains video was that I wanted to keep playing at places that I hadn't played yet. And the places that I had scheduled in 2020 to play were places that I hadn't played yet, and then I didn't get to play them at all. But maybe in the future, maybe when stuff kind of calms down a little bit, maybe when I feel more, comfortable about doing it, and if the right opportunity comes up, then, I definitely would like to play again, do a couple shows here and there, but I'm really not in any kind of hurry. Honestly, I have had more interaction doing the live streams on Facebook than I have from, going out and doing gigs, sad to say. But, it's just kind of a sign of the times. You could do a lot of stuff from home, and it's easier. Not as much involvement. I could just come down here to the basement, set up my iPad, and get my guitar, tune it up, and bust out a couple tunes for whoever wants to watch, And I know that Brian, during the pandemic, he actually said that he kind of preferred doing it over Facebook as opposed to doing it live, Because as you get older, it gets harder, you have to, especially if you have a family, then you got to try to find a babysitter if you have kids, and, or if you have a job, you got to see, if you can cut out of work early to go set up for your show or whatever, or, if you have to, take the day off or the night off or whatever, so you can go do the show. And sometimes it's not worth it because, you're not getting paid to do the show sometimes, especially if you're an original musician. So it doesn't really make sense to, cut out of work early or pay a babysitter or whatever so you can go downtown and do a show for free and play to like less people than you would play to if you were playing on Facebook Live. So, sad as that is to say. But despite not playing any gigs last year, I did have some really cool opportunities that came up. I got to do a couple live streams for the Lackawanna County Arts and Culture Department, and that was aired on Electric City Television here in northeastern Pennsylvania, in the Scranton, Pennsylvania region. So that was pretty cool. And I also was interviewed by Alan K. Stout, who is the host of Music on the Menu on 105 The River. And he, at one time, was also a music journalist and reviewed local albums. And he reviewed my very first album when it came out, Yours in Rock. And he did a series of podcasts interviewing musicians from the area of northeastern Pennsylvania about how they were coping during the quarantine. And I was one of the musicians that he interviewed, and we had a really good conversation. And that's available on YouTube, and it's in one of my playlists here on my page. Or you can just go to the Music on the Menu Facebook page, and you can find it. So, I did have some opportunities to do some cool stuff. And I also got my music and the music of the latter day featured on some different radio stations that we hadn't been on before. So the latter day got spins on Alt 92.1, which sadly no longer exists. It was like a couple weeks after they debuted our song, the station changed formats, So that really sucked because that's one less station that's going to be playing original music now in northeastern Pennsylvania. But fortunately, we still have 105 The River, and we also have Mike Nadok's show, Cellar Full of Noise. So there's still some stuff out there that's available to musicians from the Northeast PA area to get their music out there and get it heard. So basically what I'm trying to say is, even though the last couple of years really didn't go as maybe I thought they were going to go or as I hoped they would go, I made the best of it. And I think we all did. We being musicians and just really anybody in general, I guess. There's really only so much you could do, and you just try to get through it. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that the reason I'm making this Chris Hludzik Explains video is because, unlike the last Chris Hludzik Explains video where I said, 2020 is going to be a great year and I'm going to do all this stuff, I'm not making any promises this time because, who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? The world's a crazy place. This whole pandemic thing is kind of, out of control right now. It's wild. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, we're just going to, I'm just going to take it as it comes and see what happens. But the main thing that I want to talk about right now, besides my music, besides the side project, the latter day, besides, interviews that I did last year and opportunities that I had last year, which were all great, I want to talk about a new venture that I started with Brian, and it's a podcast. Because Brian and I were sitting around one day early in the fall, and we were just talking about all the stuff that we've done in music. Like, we've been on TV, we've been on the radio, we played big showcases, we've made albums, we've made singles, we worked on other people's albums, we worked on each other's albums, we played acoustic, we played electric, we played with bands, we did everything except manage a band. And we just sat around and we thought about it, like, what's one thing that we haven't done? And we both came up with, well, we've never done a podcast. And doing a podcast wasn't a new idea for me. And in fact, I had friends tell me for years, you should do a podcast, you should do a podcast. And I was always kind of like, not necessarily against it, but I was always kind of indifferent to it because, everybody does podcasts. Everyone has a podcast, and it's almost to the point where they're not really that special anymore. And I've listened to some really bad podcasts too. I mean, there's some god-awful ones out there that are just like a complete and utter waste of time. Like, you're listening to it and like, you're literally there like halfway through it. You're like, what am I doing listening to this? Why am I bothering with this? I could be doing anything else right now and I'm listening to this. And so there was always a little bit of trepidation on my part to do a podcast. But when Brian and I start talking about a podcast as being the one thing that we haven't done, the one venture we haven't tried yet, as far as social media goes anyway, because, we're on YouTube, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we were on MySpace, we were on all the, the band pages, Bandcamp, SoundCloud, Reverb Nation, this was the one place that we hadn't ventured yet. And like I said, I went into it with a bit of trepidation, but Brian was like really, really excited about it. Like, oh man, I'd always wanted to do a podcast. I've always wanted to do one. And I was like, really? Like, you want to do it? Like, because we'll, if you want to do it, we'll do it, And so he's like, yeah, I want to do it. So he wanted to do it, and that made me want to do it a little more. And, anytime that Brian and I get together and we do a project, whether it was the latter day, or if we play a show together, or if, I'm working on one of his albums, or if he's working on one of mine, we always come up with some great stuff. We just have a natural, we just have that natural connection. and whatever we do always comes out really, really well. And this podcast has been no exception. So far, we've done 6 episodes, and we're obviously planning to do as many more as we can. Until either we run out of stuff to talk about or we run out of people to talk to. We haven't had any guests on yet, but guests will be forthcoming. But again, even when we do have guests, we're not going to have guests all the time because, we don't want to become one of those podcasts where it's always about, well, there's got to be a guest, there's got to be, a gimmick, there's got to be an attraction. We want the attraction to be the podcast itself. So what is this podcast? You're asking me. What's it called and where can I find it? The podcast is called Chords and Conversations, and it's available on Spotify. The website for the podcast is anchor.fm/chords-and-conversations. And basically the podcast is about what you'd expect it to be about. It's about music. And basically the impetus for the podcast came from just conversations that Brian and I have had with each other pretty much as long as we've known each other. Every time we sit down to talk, we'll shoot the breeze about music, and we would always come up with some really interesting perspectives and opinions. And when discussing doing a podcast, I said, well, it should just be us talking about music, just like we talk about music. It should just be us having a conversation. And so it's a very conversational podcast. There's no scripts, there's no sponsors, there's no gimmicks. It's just 2 guys sharing their experiences working in music and in various aspects of it. Songwriting, performing, production, recording, you name it. Band experiences, funny stories, crazy stories, sad stories, anything pertaining to our lives in music. And so far, the format of the episodes has been, we'll do one episode that's kind of a little more lighthearted, a little more of just Brian and I kind of reminiscing about things in our careers, experiences that we've had. And then the other episodes will be, about a specific topic. So kind of like one lighthearted episode and one kind of more slightly serious episode. But the episodes are all under an hour long. And, I edit these episodes so that there are no, excessive ums or ands or uhs or, long pauses or anything like that. So the episodes flow pretty quick. And even the ones that are a little longer, that are closer to an hour, don't feel like an hour. They go by pretty quickly. And that was one of my, criterias for doing the podcast, is that we've got to keep it short and simple. We can't bore the audience, because I listen to so many podcasts that just, like I said, just take up an inordinate amount of time and don't go anywhere. And I didn't want that to happen with our podcast. So this is a very listener-friendly podcast. And it's also a family-friendly podcast too, because we don't swear on it. We don't really talk about anything bad, so your kids can listen to it, or you can listen to it around the house when your kids are running around and not have to worry about them hearing any kind of crazy stuff. So that's kind of been the main project that, I've been involved with for the last, almost 3 months now. And it's been going pretty well. We've been getting some pretty positive feedback on it. And like I said, I think we've covered a pretty interesting, array of topics thus far. And there's still more to come. And like I said, in the future, there's also going to be guests that we're going to have on. So, just another facet of Chris's life and music. Now I'm doing podcasts. But it's a lot of fun. It's really cool. And Brian's having a lot of fun with it as well. So, and as far as anything else, I mean, that's pretty much it. You know, my music is still available. It's still out there. If you're interested, it's chrishludzik.bandcamp.com. If you want to hear any of the Latter Days music, that's thelatterday.bandcamp.com. The website, as always, is chrishludzik.com, and that has links to get to everything from there. And my Facebook page is facebook.com/chrishludzik.96. The facebook.com/Chris Hludzik is still there, but for whatever reason, I can't log into it. I don't know what happened. Something happened to it earlier last year, and I can no longer log into that one. So I just use a personal one now. But facebook.com/Chris Hludzik.96. And that's where you can find all the information about Chris Hludzik, you know, keep up to date with it. I'm also on Instagram at Chris Hludzik Music. So those are all the places you could find me on the web to keep up to date. And of course, if you're already on the YouTube, then you already know how to find me on here. But for those who might be watching this, you know, through something else, maybe you're watching it through Facebook or something, it's youtube.com/Chris Hludzik. And so that was just a little summation of the years that were 2020 and 2021 and all the craziness that brought. And here's to a better 2022, folks. I mean, it's got to get better, right? It has to. I hope so. And if it can't get better, then let's at least hope it stays the same and doesn't get any worse. But thank you for listening to me ramble. I'm Chris Hludzik. This has been Chris Hludzik Explains. Have a good day.